Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Welcome and hello, listeners. I'm your host, Bryan O'Rourke. Thanks for joining us today, as it is already toward the end of February 2021. Can you believe it? A lot going on out there in the world of fitness, health clubs, and technology, as you well know. And so I'm so glad that you're joining us today to spend some time with our guest, Paul Bowman, who is, of course, CEO of Wexer. Wexer, founded by Rasmus Ingerslev, a great colleague and friend. I remember presenting at IRSA, I think it was 12 or 13 years ago now, on digitization, on content, what was going to happen. And Rasmus was right in the middle of that, creating this whole company way ahead of his time. And of course, Paul came along, I think over 6, almost 7 years ago into that organization. And I have had the pleasure of working with Paul and spending time with him over the years. He has some great insights. We have a great chat. He's visiting us from New Zealand, where he is staying. He is a Kiwi. He had gone there during the UK lockdowns and is operating out of New Zealand now. So it's a great privilege to have him on the podcast, and I hope you enjoy our listening or listening to us go back and forth on some interesting subjects that I think are quite germane to what's happening today. So without further ado, let's welcome Paul to the podcast. Well, listeners, as I mentioned in the intro, Paul and I have been chatting about things technology-wise in the space for many years, and he, as I mentioned, is kind enough to join us from New Zealand. Paul, how are you?
Good. Of all places, New Zealand. Well, I'm originally a Kiwi, so just thought I'd come back to my roots, Bryan, for a little while.
You know, you're a smart guy. It must have been a good reason to have done that.
Yeah, there was.
I hear that things are going quite well in New Zealand relative to the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, they've managed. The response from the government, I think they've done it better than anywhere else in the world. I think there's also something to say for Kiwis in terms of how compliant they are too. When there's one case, that whole city gets people leave very, very quickly. They do the response. They're still using their tracking app, and we have no cases. So I think there's good compliance by the people of New Zealand, and good government policy as well in terms of clarity and expectations. So yeah, I'm here setting up the APAC office as we speak, because of course, as part of COVID, we've seen a lot of our business really pick up in the APAC region, which is great.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to see you, and I'm glad that your family are doing well down there, and always a pleasure. Paul, we've had many a coffee, a drink, a meal or two over the many years. I think you and I were laughing in the beginning about maybe 7 years we've been talking about this, and I think you mentioned we just now came up with dispersion maybe 5 years ago, right? What were you saying? What?
Yeah. We just didn't have a fancy title for it. We flirted with a few titles, but dispersion is live and well.
Yeah, but isn't it something? I mean, and that's what I want to start off with. Of course, no one expects these kind of horrendous global pandemics to happen, and God bless all the people suffering from this, both in business and personally. We have been kind of, you have been amongst a few. I think I may be one of those kind of on the tail end, but, talking about the need for brands to extend their presence and using digital. And it, for some brands, they've done that very well, but for many brands, not. And having been at Wexer as long as you have and putting all the work you've done globally with your team, I mean, what do you think about that, Paul?
Yeah, so I think well, I guess there's the true good, bad, and ugly. As you alluded to, there's some brands that have used digital as a true value generator to be relevant to their consumers 24/7 and not just be a buzzword, truly look at a customer journey for both digital and physical and how they overlap. And I think, coincidentally, of course, those brands are the ones that are probably surviving this crisis far better than others. I think there's the bad, which is, where people have thought of digital more as a tack-on utility, thinking of themselves more as maybe a facility management organization will flirt with digital and not really grasp or probably execute, because I don't think any smart CEO or executive team are saying that they don't believe that digital has a place within our overall value proposition as an industry. However, I don't believe sometimes the actions reflect the words, and so therefore we find ourselves in a position where the C-level might agree it, but then the execution's not there. And I think we actually also have, I think, a bit of a talent shortage in our industry in terms of actually how to do digital, acquisition, demand generation, all of that within digital and how it overlaps. And I think, we have one of the best, all of our research shows that people will move on a spectrum of confidence to the physical location, because no one can beat physical. That moment of working out with a trainer or working in a great group exercise class with everyone motivated, you can't beat that. You can't replace that. However, it's how you get there. And we kind of preach the journey to get there, whereas we need to cut down the barriers of intimidation. Things like just driving to a group exercise room or or a gym, and although let's meet the customers where they truly are, and then slowly build their confidence to bring them into the gym. I think people understand that premise, but they haven't done it. I think COVID has forced them. And then I think the ugly is the ones that have kind of buried their head in the sand and just essentially said that with facility management, let's be a big club in a right location and get the price point right, which 100% I agree. COVID probably before COVID, yes, I agree that model can work, but now that model I don't think can exist or survive without digital relevance to the membership base. And that can be anything. That can be in terms of producing content, producing workouts, making sure that they can book easily. The things that we've been talking about for years, Brian. I don't want to go over over the old ground.
Listen, it is interesting because do you think, the idea of adoption, like you mentioned, there are those in the C-suite or others that might think that, oh, yes, we have to do this. Are the bigger challenges of adoption and actually execution, are they a function of culture and mindset as much as technical prowess?
100%. I think if we looked at the market, like the last kind of, I guess, big disruptive model, not just from our industry point of view, was probably the low cost model. And then they had got forced to engage with digital to be able to be more efficient, to make sure that they can streamline their cost. But then it kind of stopped there when it was looking at the value proposition of customers, because I think there was success in that model. Because if I was cheaper, I was more competitive, and therefore my clubs were running at good EBITDA margins, et cetera, et cetera. So but I think now that's really shifted, and I think we've talked about it a lot. Where my belief now is that the core is not the club, the core is the platform. But I actually defining what that platform is, I think it's a 50-50. I think it's a digital proposition and a physical proposition, because it's not just lockdown that the consumer behavior has changed so much. I think about, we talked about that theory of dispersion that Scott Galloway talks about a lot, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest disruptors for our industry ever seen. Because I think if we look at it, okay, so we've had globalization, some brands did that and did that exception. We still don't have a McDonald's for fitness across the world. We're getting closer, I guess, with some of the big brands. Then there was digitalization, but then dispersion for me is the one where people are essentially engaging with people more than they're engaging with brands. And I think there has to be a huge mind shift with an operator to say, hey, look, rather than us, we need to make sure that customer journey is good digitally and physically, but we also need to make sure that we're making sure that these rock stars and the people that we've got under our brands, as like an agency, we're managing well. Because I think a lot of the friction right now, where some clubs are doing it brilliantly, some clubs aren't, in terms of putting their rock stars, at the face of their brand, is that they're giving them a little bit more of the lion's share.
Yeah.
Where a lot of the clubs want to take the lion's share, so they're not looking at themselves as a platform of taking 25%, 30%. They want the 80%, which just doesn't work, because let's be honest, these influencers, content creators, whatever you want to call them, can just do it themselves. There's
Right.
the technology there to do it themselves. Yes, they're going to, and I know a lot of listeners will probably say, well, how about cost per acquisition versus lifetime value? But some of them are making that work, but this is where I see just as a huge opportunity for our industry, because we've already got large databases. We know the research shows that people want to move to physical, but they want to engage with, I don't believe, concepts anymore, like the traditional group exercise concepts. I think they want to engage with people, which are the concepts, and then I will lead myself into the physical class, and maybe even with that that star instructor that I've made famous on my platform. So I kind of, the way I'm seeing what success looks like in the marketplace now is where people see themselves as a kind of like a marketplace platform for talent. And I think that is the definition of dispersion, isn't it, Bryan?
It is. And on top of your point, and you're exactly right, Instagram is arguably the largest gym chain in the world right now. People may not like to hear that. Some professionals in the space are complaining about the form of Jenny X or Joe Y, and they're not getting the fact that it really comes down to what? Trust, believability, relatability. And to your point, they want to do, they want to have those relationships with people, not necessarily with brands. And that's a big thing for a lot, to your point of mindset, right? That's a problem for a lot of traditional club operators who think in a very scarcity mindset, where they're worried about, oh, they're going to steal my customers or the members, and it's kind of a different paradigm, right?
Yeah, it is, but it also isn't. And I guess I'm always coming from I think digital first. But I think if you're thinking digital first, you say, well, hang on, I've always allowed my PTs that are on rental models, or take trainers and probably have the best and have a really, really close relationship with my customer. I've done that with group exercise instructors. I've done that across the board, but now I'm not kind of happy to do it digitally, which is for me counterintuitive, because if you are truly a digital first business, you wouldn't be thinking like that. You would think, okay, we've been having these amazing instructors, these amazing PTs inside the four walls, only be able to cater for the people based off their time. Now we don't have time as an issue. We can actually get these guys to produce content, have their own regular channel under my brand. And I tell you what, the clubs that are actually successfully doing that, they're actually getting memberships based off those people that they're engaging with. So it's such a win-win-win. I can't see it, but it does, as you said, it does require a mindset shift, and it does require that these rock stars get paid the right amount of money. That's what it comes down to.
That's right. And you can see the smart brands have done that, whether it be at Equinox forming their own kind of talent agency for talent, or some of my reports have talked about execution engine for the last 3 or 4 years, talking about human capital being one of the keys, and that kind of talent. So when you're thinking about this, and by the way, we're going to have in the show notes, of course, I love your newsletter. I read it that you sent out, and we're going to have that in the show notes for people to subscribe to, because you touch on these kind of subjects, and one of them is the idea of content, because a lot of brands they have a kind of a, they think they have to be perfect, or they think they're frozen into perfection, and it's really a big challenge for them to get their head around what you're talking about. How do you produce it? How do you do it? I mean, is that how are people dealing with that?
Yeah, I think you have to look at it from a technology point of view as well in terms of producing content. It's people that haven't started, they need to start, and then because you can reiterate. I guess the joys about the data that we are able to generate with with the Wexer platforms and other platforms is that there's so much data, and to be able to understand what consumers actually want, and so therefore if you can produce, and I guess, well, let's take a step back. What's changed dramatically since COVID is the the rate of refresh. So where people would normally do, on our platform, 8 titles, one produced title, they'll do it on average 8 times. So maybe, a content provider can hire out Venice Beach, spend a lot more money on that production because the return's there. Now it's, we literally, I actually saw the stats just before I came onto this call. It's 1.1. It was 1.4 in December, and it was 1.7 in March. So, it just keeps going down. So people essentially are now wanting new content all the time. So that actually changes the mindset of perfection, because yes, you can get your execution right. Yes, you can do it. You can do all this type of stuff, but the actual starting and being engaged with that customer and getting those refresh rates are actually far more important to a customer than perfection. And I think this is a huge disruption to actually legacy-based content businesses, because where they've taken a view of, okay, I need to do things over a quarter, and I plan it. And don't get me wrong, that content is amazing. I massively respect what they do. However, now this is where I think these, user-generated influencing content, creating content that can produce it faster, are actually getting more views. And we're seeing that directly on our platform. So, the thing is, you can either use, I personally think it should be the talent of the club that should be the one that be generating the content on a regular basis. Some clubs can't do that, but of course there's multiple solutions that enable that. Even not to plug Wexer too much, but Wexer has the third-party heavily on-demand content, right, but also has, we're getting more and more influencers on the platform that are creating content every day. So the refresh rate can be done by just engaging with a supplier, but we are seeing the key being the club producing content, and third-party content as well as the mixture. Because don't get me wrong, legacy content still has its place, but we know now that people want the refresh rate high. We did a survey which it was 4,000 people that came back to it out of the for our clubs that we support, and they said that it doesn't matter if they work out each Monday, they want that whole interface of content changed, or if they work out that morning and they want to do another workout that evening, they want it changed. So and I think if you look at the likes of the Pelotons of the world, and they're producing at least 8 titles a day, and that's kind of the market. I know also the likes of Cyberotics and with the RSG group, they're also doing the same. A lot of the clubs that are having good success on their platforms are doing around about 8 titles a day. I don't think you have to do exactly that much. I think you definitely get away with 4 or 5, but we're also seeing operators, especially during lockdown, and we haven't actually seen this trend happen without lockdown, is actually essentially put their own group exercise schedule online, which is not hard to do. You've got one studio, get the people coming through, produce it, get it out there. It doesn't have to be perfect. So a long-winded answer to your question, Bryan, is essentially start. But then if you have started, then it's the recommendation is understand the data and then produce the content, because you'll be amazed at the different personas of individuals you have in your club that may, you might be a high intensity club, but they actually want to do bar and ballet, or they want to do, it always shocks us in terms of what the users are actually requesting and or watching. So, that's what you need to stay abreast to all the time.
Yeah, and other content. I mean, that's not just workout content eventually, and there's other things and differentiating that content. And then also the nature of content itself. I mean, I'm fascinated by the AI music platforms that are coming out, and other platforms that are coming. When it comes,
and they're bloody good as well already. That's what scares me the most.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then you have, big tech. So right, on top of it, when it comes to customer choice, now you have these other brands with huge scale production. Amazon's coming into the game. We already seen Apple, others. So, they're in that content business as well. So even more of a reason to be diverse in that regard, right?
Yeah. Like I'm always the optimist in regards to when big tech come in, because I think it just traditionally grows the pie.
Right.
If they're saying the industry is big enough to go into, then that means we're on the right track in a way, rather than, right, from my eyes, a fearful model. But it also makes it, and we've talked about this for years and years and years, is that think of local star power. it's not because it's about the connections, right? Which we know so well in our industry, but sometimes we don't utilize that well in digital. Is that, these local stars that might have a following of, 10,000, have probably done group exercise classes for your club, for the last 4 years. Those are the people that need to be on the screen, because those are the people that feel real, and that they want to look at. And, I think this is where also Wexer's had to change a lot. Is, we never wanted our platform to be like essentially like a vlog at the same time as being, but it works, have people having personality before they start their content. We're like, no, people just want to go straight into content. People just want the outcome is more important than the personality. But that's really shifted. We're actually nearly recommending people to have a little bit of, the first, I don't know, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, have a nice intro where your personality comes across, then get into it. Because I actually think that's just a better user journey, because it's exactly what we have live, right? You come into the class, you meet the instructor, you have a little chat. There's make that as replicable as possible, and that reflects on usage. And I think, again, Peloton has done that very, very well, in terms of bringing their, those under the brand of Peloton. They're all famous in their own right. These Peloton stars now, right?
Yeah, people do business with them on their platform because they like them and they appreciate them. And all you have to do, to your point, Paul, is go to the top YouTubers, and that's what they do. You understand the persona and who that is, and that makes them much more relatable. It also creates, I think, as you were alluding to, more context behind the actual physical workout. And that makes it a better experience.
Yeah, well, and we're seeing it. The traditional concepts of, this is a HIIT module. This is weighted workout module in a group exercise class. It just doesn't. There's a place for it. Don't get me wrong, but I would say that place is with the older generation of users. The new generation of users 100% follows the person. So what that person looks like, what that person sounds like, what that person believes in, that's who I will follow in my workout, rather than a concept. And I think we are stuck a little bit in the concept creation. We're having multiple conversations. We supply the major chains around the world, and it's still in a concept. And I'm like, we have to stop thinking concept, because I think the worry is, and I understand the nervousness is when you say, okay, well, I want to put Bryan on the TV, and he's going to be my rock star. There's the risk, because you're essentially becoming a talent agency, and there's a risk of he might go rogue and do something that might hurt your brand. But also talent agencies have been dealing with those type of issues for years and years and years, so we can learn a lot from those. And that would be my recommendation. And of course, Wexer as an organization has plenty of examples of where we can help you in that.
Well, listen, to that point, so, having known about Wexer in the beginning, very beginning, and having seen you come along, and it's been around for a while now, and your business has continued to iterate around these things and been a leader in this sphere, it must be quite a thing to go through that, as you have over the years, and your founders, and see what's transpired. And it must be something. I know my own self, having been talking about this 12 years ago, and I think almost as long as Wexer's been in business, and watching this happen. Then what probably is to come. As a CEO now, that's quite a thing. How do you you have to have some pretty keen insight, a little bit of humility, I know, but given that, how, running a company that's on the edge like that's a little different than, a lot of other legacy players.
Oh, it's bloody good fun, Bryan. No, but it all comes down to the, I look at, I always go back to the why, and when Wexer was first created, we wanted to be, originally, of course, by Rasmus Ingerslev, was an online health club.
Yeah.
Of course, that was done in 2008, and that was far too beyond its time. Of course, when a young little Kiwi guy came along and said, I think we need to kill dead space and clubs. That was the start of Wexer Virtual, but the premise has always been how to be relevant to our customers 24/7. I think all of us had come from clubs. Myself being with Virgin and Gymbox, and and understanding that essentially we were only catering for an hour of a day, or maybe an hour of a week, depending on their usage patterns, and we needed to be out there. I always used to look at the gym box instructors, where we used to create our own classes, and we're like, well, hang on, why can't this was 2010, why can't I get all of these people out on a device where people can follow it? That was quite radical at that time.
Right.
But our whole kind of why has always been, how do we be relevant? And then I guess where we've kind of flipped it to is, how do we ensure that our industry stays relevant? Because we are a B2B supplier. We've always doubled down within health and fitness. We haven't really focused too much on other verticals, even though they've come our way. But really, it's been, we are 100% in the industry of trying to ensure that we digitally transform in a way. Sometimes I don't like that word, because it's got so many different contexts to it. But it's essentially digital relevance to that user. And I think we've always talked about people becoming more important than brands over time. And I think the likes of COVID has just accelerated all these kind of ideas, concepts, all these kind of little grassroots that we were seeing, that influencers have always been around for a long time in the advertising space and all the rest of it, but now they're really coming in heavy from a fitness point of view, because they are producing so good content, they're producing value, but also I think more importantly, there's technology now that can actually support them to deliver their services in a really well packaged way.
Yep. And there's also, and we're not going to name names, but there's also other, in the supplier side of the industry outside, there's all kinds of implications where, whether you were a content company trying to distribute, and now you have a model there that needs to change. You were an equipment company that didn't have a content play, and now you better have one. There's just so many different implications to that. So where are brands going to have to go, Paul, on the supplier and the delivery side? Are we, you mentioned decentralization, kind of a new era of cooperation amongst creators and platforms being the center of the consumer space with everything else connected around it. New dynamics. I mean, are there a few key points you see as being where we're going from here?
Yeah, I think it's more of what we're seeing on a larger scale. I think we've only started to see the roots of people look at their overall offering, putting their talent right front and center, bringing more and more local stars into that mixing pot, because that's what these other B2C apps are doing. Like if we look at Sweat of Kyla and Fit Plan and all these, or they're just bringing, they might have started off with one famous person like Center, but then they've moved constantly to bring others in, because not one person can solve everything. And solve all the different genres, because you'll get stuck at a point where you can't get any more growth, because you might have reached 300,000 members paying subscription for that particular celebrity or person, and that's really where you're going to stay. And so they've realized that adding more people to that and becoming a bit more of a marketplace actually increases my overall user base. And I think clubs need to have exactly the same approach, because but I think there needs to be a mental shift between, a few CEOs asked me and have been really honest, brutally honest actually, in terms of how hard it is to get the team to execute. And I think we can't look at the same people that have done our marketing and demand generation in the companies right now, and I think there has to be a split. I do believe that if we're saying, the platform is now 50% club, 50% digital platform or marketplace, then maybe that's a situation of two different teams. And I know cost structures are strained right now, but in my eyes, I think a CEO has to have two different teams to be able to use two different brains, because I think that's where innovation starts to die. That's when ideas start to die, because they're always going to be biased to one way. And right now, it's always biased to the physical delivery, right? Which I totally understand, and we've done a good job of that for years. But it's not about that now. We're under attack more than ever, and at price point levels, at value chain levels, at so many different levels. So it's all about how do we actually execute to be able to make it real. And there is and I also with that, I think a lot of people probably hear me say that and say, well, then I just have to double my cost and also have like a live production facility. You just don't need to. You can grow organically based off your success that you have. Like the starting point would always be get your talent on, start with content, start making some money from it. Ensure that you're not thinking of that money pot that's helping the clubs. That money pot gets reinvested back into the team so you can keep growing. Think of yourself as a tech organization rather than think you profiteer from the digital means, because digital is making a lot of money for people now, but some are reinvesting and doing better. Some are literally just thinking it's starting to become a bit of a profit center, which I think is wrong.
Yeah, you have to think of it as a different thing. And you know many of the stories of innovation. You have to carve out those innovative efforts outside of the core culture of the business, because they won't work otherwise. They'll be stifled. I
always have to use the Disney example of they stopped paying dividends, they doubled down on content, and look at I believe Disney is going to be another 30% bigger company shortly because of all the things that they have. I know that's a pretty impressive brand, but it gives an idea of, don't think of it as a dividend payment back to your health club. Think of it as its own business that you're going to constantly reinvest in until you've got the scale that you want to do.
Well, even Apple and their famous spin out of the Mac team and their famous spin out. I mean, they did the same thing. Good organizations that are good at innovation, that's what they do to be successful. You're exactly right. Yeah. Well, Paul, any final words of wisdom? I'm so grateful to have you, CEO of Wexer, on the line for the listeners. Longtime friend. We've talked about this before it ever emerged, and then before you, Rasmus, when he was just starting the company. It's always a pleasure. Any last words of wisdom for the listeners out there? You've got thousands of people listening around the world, and I know they're dying to hear your viewpoints. So
now I'm nervous. Now I'm nervous. No. Look, I think most of us have started. In terms of our digital journey, I think that the critical, and again, this is not a plug. You have to own your own platform. You can't. A lot of people I'm still seeing where mistakes are getting made is they're using the likes of YouTube, Instagram, or the rest of it that aren't controllable monetizing platforms for them, but not monetizing for the operator. Use them as a lead generation tool, but then own the platform. And then once you've got the platform, then for me it's let's then start to identify who is the rock stars that you want to put in. Who can you have a business relationship as essentially a fitness agency, and then just listen to the members and listen to the data. But I think more importantly, listen to the data, because we see a lot of clubs make quite costly mistakes based off interviewing members. And I think even sometimes, because digital is so new, they don't know what they want. They might, it's that classic of, great that you put on this particular content. I did it 3 months ago. I haven't done it again. Look at what they do rather than what they say, I think is far more important. And then just reiterate. And then I think the joys of from a digital perspective, when we're trying to hybridize the bricks and mortar industry, is that there is so many good suppliers now. It's not. I think maybe 5 years ago there was an argument that the technology wasn't up to the level of a lot of the kind of the traditional B2C apps, but that's just not the case now. And the thing is, we can use our clubs to be the database that's already alive, their marketing hubs. That's the greatest kind of greatest experience we can offer. But it's just that piece of how do we get digital and physical to overlap, and that's a bigger piece. And I would just say, speak to the team at Wexer and we'll help you. The last plug.
That's perfect. Paul, thank you so much for making time. It's great to see you as always. And I know our listeners, as well as I do, appreciate your insights and wisdom.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Hello, listeners. This is Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks so much for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. The podcast is made possible by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, a consortium of global brands working together to enhance the adoption of technologies in the fitness space. Our company, Videri Ventures, which is invested in Vertimax, Montezuma, Gold's Gym, Houston, Texas, and Fitness 24/7 Thailand, also underwrites the podcast, along with our service companies, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and others. Please feel free to share this podcast with your colleagues. And if I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or find me on any of the major social networks. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.